It all went down in 2016 when I was just a fifth grader trying to get through another regular school day. If you remember that year, you probably remember the wave of creepy killer clown sightings that spread across the country. It was on every news channel, every social feed, like some bizarre nationwide dare. Grown-ups kept brushing it off as a silly prank, but for kids like me, it felt real and terrifying. My school sat in a calm, sleepy suburb where nothing exciting ever happened. The kind of place where you'd swear the biggest drama was a late school bus. That afternoon felt no different, until it wasn't. It was about 1 o'clock, close to the final bell, and our classroom was so quiet you could hear pencils scratch the paper. A few kids whispered to each other, but mostly it was that heavy end-of-day hush, the kind that makes you think everything is perfectly safe. Right before it all flipped, the moment that girl shouted, "There's a clown outside," the room flipped from quiet to chaos. I turned and saw him through the glass. No joke, a full-on clown standing just feet from our window. His suit was baggy and filthy, red and yellow like it had been dragged through mud, and his face was painted ghost white with black smeared around the eyes. That grin looked too wide, too fake, like something out of a nightmare. He didn't move at first, just stared straight at us, then raised one hand and began a slow, deliberate wave. A few kids giggled nervously, but most of us froze, hearts pounding. For a second, it felt like the world outside that window didn't even exist. Just us and that clown. Mrs. Riker's calm broke the second she saw that clown refuse to move. She tapped the glass with her knuckles and said, louder this time, "Excuse me, classes are in session, you need to leave." Nothing. He didn't even blink, just kept that slow, unsettling wave and a grin that felt like it could swallow the room. She told us to sit tight and grabbed the corded phone by the door, stepping into the hallway to whisper to the front office. The air in the room felt heavy, like we were all holding one big breath. When she came back, her face was pale but steady. Without a word, she pulled the blinds closed, shutting out that awful grin, and that's when the principal's voice cracked through the loudspeaker. "Staff, please get your classrooms into lockdown formation." His tone was sharp, urgent. No doubt for the teachers more than us. My stomach dropped. Mrs. Riker snapped into motion, lights off, door locked, her voice low but firm. "Everyone under your desks, now." Chairs scraped against the floor as we scrambled. Some kids tried to laugh it off, but you could hear the fear in those shaky giggles. I pressed myself against the cool tile, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Realizing this was no prank anymore, we stayed crouched under those desks so long it felt like the whole world had gone silent, though later I learned it was only about 30 minutes. When the principal's voice finally came back on the loudspeaker, it was like a sudden rush of air. He said the lockdown was over and that the situation had been handled. No details, just that school security confirmed the clown was gone. We all sat up stiff and confused, the room buzzing with whispers, but Mrs. Riker kept her face neutral and told us to get back to our assignment like nothing had happened. The rest of the afternoon dragged, everyone pretending to focus while sneaking glances at the window. Dismissal felt surreal. Kids chattered in nervous bursts, and teachers acted like it was just another Friday. Chris and I walked home together, trying to shake it off, when two girls from our grade suddenly sprinted past us. Their faces were pale. One of them gasped, "There's someone in the woods!" We both froze and turned toward the small patch of trees behind the school. It isn't a real forest, just a thin strip that blocks the street. But there he was. Same filthy red and yellow suit, the white face paint smeared, black circles around the eyes. He stood half hidden behind a trunk, still as a statue, and then slowly raised his arm and started that same eerie wave. Only this time, It wasn't playful. He was staring straight at the girls who had run by, like he was trying to draw them back. My stomach dropped. All the fear from the lockdown came rushing back in a single cold jolt. Chris and I didn't say a word. We just bolted, hearts pounding, legs moving faster than I ever thought they could. Every step felt like it was echoing in my chest. When I finally got home, I ran straight to my parents and spilled everything. The classroom, the lockdown, and the clown waiting in the trees. My parents immediately called the school, trying to make sense of it all, and later I heard from another kid that the police had been called again, patrolling the area, but they never found anyone. To this day, nobody knows who that guy really was. Was he just a prankster, some attention seeker trying to scare kids? Or was it something darker, something we never saw coming? The thing that still creeps me out the most is knowing he came back after the lockdown, hiding in the trees, just watching, waiting, as kids walked home. It's that image that sticks with me, that feeling of being watched when you think you're safe. And even now, years later, thinking about it still makes my skin crawl. This happened when I was in university, from 2021 to 2023 at the University of Huddersfield. It's not really a party school, so most students spent late nights on campus, either in the library or in the academic buildings that stayed open 24/7. I was never the type to stay out late, but during my final year, I really didn't have a choice. I was taking this advanced statistics class, and the professor was notorious for giving out massive assignments. One of the biggest projects was due soon, and I was already falling behind. To make things worse, my laptop was acting up, so I decided to head to the business building and use the computers there. The business building always felt cut off from the rest of campus. It was 3 stories tall, kind of old, and had this strange sterile silence at night. But the computer lab on the 2nd floor was usually empty after 9 p.m., so I figured it would be the perfect spot. That night I got there around 10. The campus was dead quiet, and as soon as I stepped inside, I noticed how much colder it felt compared to outside. I swiped my student ID, heard the beep, and the door unlocked. The smell of cleaning chemicals was so strong, which told me the janitors had already finished their rounds. I thought I'd have the whole place to myself. I went straight to the computer lab, logged in, and started working. For a while it felt normal, the hum of the machine and my typing echoing in the silence. I kept checking the clock, telling myself I'd leave before 1 a.m., but at 11:30, the air shifted, the silence grew heavy, and I heard a faint sound in the hallway, like slow footsteps. Too clear to be my imagination. I was scrolling through data when a door slammed somewhere deeper in the building. Not the front entrance. This was closer, heavier. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was the air system, or maybe a janitor, but I remembered they'd already left hours ago. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my heart picking up. Then came the footsteps, slow, heavy, echoing down the empty hallway outside the lab. They weren't faint or rushed. Whoever it was wanted me to hear them. I froze. Eyes locked on my screen, praying they'd pass by without opening the door. But instead of passing by, the footsteps stopped right outside the lab door. My chest tightened. I knew if I leaned back I could see through the little window, but I couldn't make myself move. I just sat, frozen, holding my breath. Then the handle rattled. Hard. Not like someone checking if it was locked, but like they wanted me to know they were there. Like they wanted to get in. My heart pounded so loud I swore it echoed in the room. Doors. The doors lock automatically after hours, so I told myself they couldn't open it, but the way they kept jiggling that handle made my stomach twist. It felt personal, like a game. After what felt like forever, the rattling stopped. The silence was deafening. Then, slow and steady, the footsteps started again, fading into the hallway until they were gone. I sat frozen, debating if I should just pack up and leave, but my project was due in the morning and I kept telling myself it had to be some student playing a prank. Trying to shake it off, I focused on my typing, but less than 10 minutes later, the sound came again. Footsteps. Only this time they weren't in the hallway, they were above me. The ceiling had those thin tiles that sometimes creak with the pipes, but this wasn't pipes. This was slow, heavy movement, like someone crawling or dragging themselves right over my head. My skin went cold as the noise inched closer. I stared up, terrified of what I might see. One of the ceiling tiles shifted, just enough to show something heavy was pressing down on it. Then came a slow creak, like someone lowering themselves, careful not to be heard. That was it. I couldn't stay another second. I yanked out my flash drive, shoved my notebook into my backpack, and bolted for the door. The moment I stepped into the hallway, it felt like another world. The buzzing fluorescent lights barely lit the space, and the only sound was my sneakers squeaking on the tiles. My chest was tight as I shoved open the stairwell door and rushed down. That's when I made the mistake of looking up. On the landing, just one floor above me, stood a man. He wasn't a student, and he definitely wasn't a professor. His clothes were baggy, torn, like he didn't belong there at all. His face was half hidden in the shadows, but I could clearly see his mouth stretched into this wide, unnatural grin. He never moved, just stood there, staring right at me. My stomach dropped and I bolted, flying down the stairs so fast I nearly fell. I slammed through the first floor door, sprinted toward the exit, and swiped my ID. The second it clicked open, I shoved through and ran across campus, never daring to look back. I didn't stop running until I was inside my dorm, door locked, back pressed against it as I tried to catch my breath. My hands were shaking, my heart still pounding. The next morning, I forced myself back to the business building just to turn in my project. In daylight, it looked normal, almost safe, like last night had been a bad dream. But then I saw it. One of the ceiling tiles was missing, the exact tile above where I'd been working, and another in the corner. My stomach dropped. Someone hadn't just been up there, they'd been watching me. And when I thought about it later, the scariest part wasn't just that he rattled the door. It was that, when he couldn't get in, he actually climbed back up into the ceiling and moved across the tiles like it was nothing. I can't even imagine what would have happened if I hadn't run when I did. That thought still chills me. Honestly, I think it's safe to say I'll be finishing my work from my dorm from now on. No project is worth being in that building alone at night. My name's Annabelle. I'm 20 now, and I'm from the UK. But this story takes me back to when I was 16, during high school, what we call college over there. It's about the single scariest day of my life. I know that sounds a little dramatic, but once you hear it, you'll understand. At my school, we had to wear lanyards with ID cards on them. Anyone could walk into the main entrance, but to get past the foyer, you had to scan your card on a screen that unlocked the door. The IDs had your face and name, though most kids wore them flipped around so no one could see. The school itself was pretty new, a big building split into 3 sections. One part was for a special school, another for a nursery, and the last third was our high school. I had only just started there, and I still remember on day 1, the teachers warned us not to let anyone inside if we didn't know them. The incident I'm about to tell you about happened during my second week, and trust me, it's something I'll never forget. I had geography class that day, and about halfway through, maybe 20 minutes after lunch, it all started. I downed this huge cup of juice from the cafeteria because you're not allowed to bring drinks into class, and I didn't want to toss it. By the time I sat through half the lesson, I was dying to use the bathroom. My teacher usually hated when people asked to leave during class. He thought we should have gone during break, but I guess he could see how desperate I was, so he finally sighed and let me go. I grabbed my lanyard and hurried out into the hallway. It was quiet. Too quiet. Most of the other classes were still in session, so every step I took echoed off the walls. The thing about that school was, when it was empty, it didn't feel safe. It felt exposed, like someone could be standing around any corner, just waiting. As I made my way toward the bathrooms, I couldn't shake this weird feeling that I wasn't alone. This detail matters because at that time, nobody should have been walking around the school. Even teachers rarely left their classrooms once lessons started. I pushed through the double doors into the cafeteria and it was completely silent. Empty tables, dim lights, just my footsteps echoing back at me. It felt way too quiet for a place that usually buzzed with noise. I crossed into another hallway with a row of classrooms, slipped into the bathroom, and then headed back toward the cafeteria. That's when something felt off, like the air had shifted. I couldn't explain why, but suddenly I knew. I wasn't the only one in there anymore. When I stepped back into the cafeteria, my heart skipped. A man was sitting alone at one of the tables. At first, I brushed it off. People do wander around, even if it's rare during class. But something felt off. He was clearly too old to be a student, and the way he just sat there, watching, gave me chills. I told myself it was probably a teacher or maybe a parent, but deep down, I knew something about him wasn't right. Then he suddenly said, "Hey." I literally squealed because I'm a jumpy person, and I wasn't expecting him to talk. My face went red with embarrassment, but he just laughed and said, "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you." That's when I noticed he had a lanyard hanging around his neck. In that moment, I convinced myself he must have been a teacher, but something about the way he smiled still felt off. Looking back, what really gets me is that even though he had his lanyard on, the ID was flipped backwards, so you couldn't see his face or name. Like I said earlier, students would do that all the time and the scanner would still work, so it wasn't unusual for kids. But for a teacher, that was strange, and I didn't think twice about it then. He looked at me and said, "I need some help getting some work things out of my car. Do you mind coming with me for just a sec?" Without hesitation, I smiled and said, "Yeah, of course," completely unaware of how wrong that decision could have gone. Because honestly, I didn't think twice. I just assumed he was a teacher. We walked out of the cafeteria, through the quiet foyer, and then stepped outside. That's when I noticed something felt off. He wasn't making small talk like teachers usually do, and the silence was heavy. What really made my stomach tighten was how his hands wouldn't stay still. He kept fidgeting, almost like he was nervous or hiding something. At one point, he shoved his hands into his pockets, then pulled them out again, fidgeting like he couldn't stay still. I'm pretty shy and awkward in social situations, so I didn't try to make conversation either. The silence felt heavier with every step. And the thing about the front of our school is that once you leave the building, you've got about 50 meters to the car park. But you can't even see it until you're right next to it because of the thick bushes blocking the view. So if you keep walking straight past the car park, you'd leave school property. But instead, we turned toward it, the silence between us growing heavier. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Yeah, my work stuff is in the boot." That's what we call the trunk in the UK. "I've got a few bags, just need you to help me carry them into the school." I remember nodding, saying, "Yeah, that's fine," even though something inside me felt off. As we walked down toward the far end of the lot, he pointed out a blue car. At first, nothing seemed strange, but as we got closer, I noticed something. Shapes in the back seat, barely moving. My stomach dropped. Within seconds, I realized there weren't just bags in there, there were people. 2 men, crouched low, trying not to be seen. My whole body froze. My brain screamed run, but instead I just stood there, staring, blanking out completely. They must have realized I saw them because before I could move, the back door creaked open, slow at first, then swinging wide. And then it all happened so fast. One of the men scrambled out of the car, and the guy I thought was a teacher suddenly grabbed my arm as I spun around to run. He was tall, broad, way stronger than me. And for context, I'm barely 5'2" and pretty underweight. I remember the shock of his grip locking around my arm, cold and tight, and for a second I thought I was done. But somehow, maybe pure adrenaline, I yanked with everything I had and tore myself free. My heart was racing so loud I could hear it in my ears as I bolted toward the school, every step feeling like it could be my last. I could hear heavy footsteps pounding behind me, each one sounding closer, but then, thank God they stopped. My school had huge glass automatic doors you had to wait for to open, and if they'd kept chasing, they would have caught me for sure. The doors felt like forever, but they slid open, and I bolted inside, heart hammering. I sprinted through the foyer into the open cafe by the library and rushed straight to the woman working there. Then I opened the bakery and slid down the ledge, springing into the grimy cafe by the library and rushed straight to the woman working there. Breathless and shaking, I told her everything. She helped calm me down, then walked me to a teacher's office where they called my parents and the police. Luckily, the school had security cameras in the parking lot, and that's how they were caught, and later charged with attempted kidnapping. The scariest part? That man only got inside because a student had dropped their lanyard and he used it to sneak in, flipping the ID so no one could tell. After that day, I couldn't bring myself to go back to school for weeks. I'm still in therapy, trying to deal with the fear and shock of it all. But writing this out and sharing it feels like a step toward finally taking some of that power back. This remains the scariest experience of my life, and honestly, I still think about what could have happened if I hadn't trusted my gut. Sharing this story is my way of reminding you to always stay alert, even in places where you think you're safe. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. It means a lot to me, and I hope these stories help you stay more aware. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more true school horror stories, and check out the other videos on my channel for even more chilling experiences. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a creepy encounter at school or somewhere you thought was safe? Share it in the comments, because your story might help someone else.